I was just used to having things in order and everything compartmentalized. And then when real life hits as you get an adult and you're out of that cocoon of structure that school gives you, and when being with your parents, what that gives you, and you are now in control of that structure. For me, it was a very foreign idea because I thought that I was organized, but that was really because I was working in the structure that was provided to me. But to build my own structure, I was lacking on that. And I remember during that time period, so I was in graduate school and I was constantly emailing my professors asking for extensions because I just couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep track of what was due when. In the same way, I lost track of due dates for credit card payments. And I was constantly calling up the credit card companies saying, I totally forgot the payment. I'm so sorry. Can I get an extension or can I get the late fee waived? Because I'll pay it now. I just slipped my mind. And so for me, seeing that breath of fresh air with this course specifically, and then it expounded on all other areas I looked into, distractions as well.
Welcome to the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. In the Champions Corner edition, I'm Mike Deaton, and together with Ligia, my co host in life, business, and this podcast, we're taking you into the training room, deep in the dojo, sharing the secrets of what it takes to forge a champion. We're digging deep into mindset mastery, high performance habits, best in class behaviors, and bringing you the tips and techniques that maximize human potential, brought to you from some of the best in the business.
So grab your buds and your seat, hit subscribe, and get ready to up your game. Let's do the show.
Let's do it.
Are you the master of your time, or do you feel there's not enough time in the day to get everything done? Assuming, like us, you fall in the latter category. We have a great guest on the pod today.
Avi Friedman is a time management coach who works with business owners who want to use their time more efficiently. His coaching business was born out of a personal need for better organization and time management in his own life. And he's finding many others that share the same need. This episode is filled with tips and insights on how to be more efficient and overcome procrastination. I walked away with a page full of notes. Join us now and let's dig into this topic with Avi Friedman. Avi, welcome to the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. We're excited to dive in today and talk about all things productivity and business efficiency.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward.
Yeah, great. So on these In the Champion Corner episodes, we like to dive into best practices, success habits, all these kind of things. So it's right in your wheelhouse, I think. Maybe before we dive in deep, just give us some background, a little bit about your origin story and how you got into business coaching and consulting there.
Absolutely. So my background is actually, I am a therapist by my background,
Hmm.
marriage family therapist. And as I was working in therapy as a case manager in a facility, I found myself very overwhelmed by just the adult life. I found myself pretty organized when I was in high school and a little bit post high school. But then when juggling a family of young kids and juggling a career, juggling graduate school, juggling a little side hustle that I had, I was finding myself constantly overwhelmed and feel like I'm drowning in everything. And I remember I was in my office and I saw this ad on Facebook, like how to stop drowning in piles and papers. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I'm feeling. I feel like I'm drowning. And I bought the course and I sat in my office. I locked the door for 2 days straight just to build a system. How do I organize my files, organize my papers? And that led me on the journey of really getting into time management, getting into working on procrastination and building routines. And it really led me on this journey. And I found that my own personal transformation was inspiring to me and I was able to help other people. I'm like, you know what? I know a lot of other people have struggles, especially nowadays. There's so many things on our plate that I ended up starting a coaching practice. And 3 years later, really enjoying what I do. I'm working with lots of business owners and entrepreneurs.
That's beautiful. I think so many of our stories are born out of personal frustrations and or experiences, life experiences. And that's great. You found that. I know I personally, I've never struggled with overwhelm. I don't know. Lydia probably has, but I hear that from so many people. And no, as business owners, we certainly feel
Yes.
there's so many things you want to do, so many things you need to do. Then there's life. And
Right.
as you mentioned, especially you get married, you have kids, all these things get going. Yeah, it can get overwhelmed. And I haven't even gotten into the world of distractions that we're immersed in today with everything going on, emails and social media and regular media and all of that. So that's great. I think as I heard you tell your story, it really piqued my curiosity that you went from this place of feeling overwhelmed to finding something of interest, which for you was this way to get out of drowning. And you went into this uber focused time period. I think you said 2 days or whatever. You locked yourself away and you were so compelled by the content and the dream of what it could deliver. Was that unusual for you? It sounds like it was, just in that you had this overwhelmed drowning feeling, but then you went just full in to this. Is that just something you felt just so
Yeah,
compelled to?
absolutely. Because what I was feeling, and again, because I was so used to being organized, and because again, my room was always like I shared a room with my younger brother, and my room was always very neat, and his side was always not the neat side. And for me, I was just used to having things in order and everything compartmentalized. And then when real life hits as you get an adult and you're out of that cocoon of structure that school gives you, and when being with your parents, what that gives you, and you are now in control of that structure. For me, it was a very foreign idea because I thought that I was organized, but that was really because I was working in the structure that was provided to me. But to build my own structure, I was lacking on that. And I remember during that time period, so I was in graduate school and I was constantly emailing my professors asking for extensions because I just couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep track of what was due when. In the same way, I lost track of due dates for credit card payments. And I was constantly calling up the credit card companies saying, I totally forgot the payment. I'm so sorry. Can I get an extension or can I get the late fee waived? Because I'll pay it now. I just slipped my mind. And so for me, seeing that breath of fresh air with this course specifically, and then it expounded on all other areas I looked into, distractions as well, one of the areas I worked on. So I remember like even to have, I think it was 8 modules in the course. And I was actually, now when I finished work, I wasn't finished with the course. I actually had my phone put on my dashboard in my car and I was listening to the modules or watching the modules, which don't recommend, but it was just like there was so much information that I felt like this really can really ease my mind and really give me that grounding that I need to deal with everything. And again, just how do I deal with projects that are due now? What about projects that I don't have time now, but I'd love to do in 3 months from now or 6 months? How do I push myself to take action when I know it's important? Make those phone calls that are uncomfortable. So all those different areas are areas that really spoke to me because there were struggles that I was going through. And because I was so used to being organized and now I was in this upheaval, it made a huge difference for me.
That's brilliant.
And what were the biggest changes that you made during that time?
So one story that actually reminds me of is my wife had asked me about if I renew the car registration. And for me, so I said, I have it actually put in my folder for in the middle of June, I'm going to be paying that car registration. I didn't need to worry about things that weren't in the here and now. I built a system where I was able to say, you know what? I know when it's important, I'm going to remember it. And being able to have that security in that system,
Mhm.
again, that system led to time management and knowing I'm secure that I have my day outlined in a way which the important tasks will get done or the important slots of time will be there. So just having that confidence in the system that I had built,
Mhm.
again, with help from that course and other courses, really is what made the biggest difference for me to be able to take care of all the things and not worry about the 100 different ideas swarming around my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think as business owners, we feel a lot of times compelled or this need to have systems in place, right? You need, otherwise things do get forgotten. And when you're a business owner, it's really important because you've got on the client's facing side, you've got leads and you've got follow ups and people that you're actually dealing with. And then on the admin side, you already touched on bills and all these things that can really put your business at risk. So I think I won't say it's second nature, but I think people see it more easily. But then on the personal side of life, I think a lot of us don't even get introduced to the concept of having systems and things like that. What years was this time period where you were finding this and going through creating your programs and your systems?
Sure. It was probably about, I would say about 2017
Okay, so let
is
me
when I had that discovery of how to build the systems. And then over the next couple of years, I had really transformed my personal system into being more effective and more efficient. And then I was listening to a boot camp from some coaching program where they were talking about what's an area that you've developed yourself that you would want to help and help other people with. What's that? I think Amy Porterfield calls it the 10% edge, where what's one thing that I've actually accomplished and I've been able to change my life in that I can go and help other people accomplish what they could do in their lives. And it took me a couple of weeks to think about what have I worked on. People said, "Oh, you can be like a coach in parenting," but I'm like, I never really worked on that. I think I'm a pretty good parent, but it's not something that I've really done a lot of work in and built strategies. It's just my intuition. Marriage, again, I'm happily married, but it's not like aside from my therapy training, I didn't want to dabble in that. And I found, you know what, this is really, it hit me like, oh, in being productive and in managing my time, managing my projects, building routines, procrastination, all those things were things that I had worked on. And it hit me like, oh, I could really help other people with that. Even though I've never really seen it advertised like a time management coach, but I still felt that it was a way where people are struggling with it and it would really help not just everyday people, but especially with business owners and juggling all the different hats that they're wearing, especially when they're in the earlier stages of the business. Let's say 5 employees or less. That's really when you tend to wear all the hats in your business.
Very true. I think we can
Yeah.
both sympathize with that. Definitely starting up a business. Yeah, I was just curious about the time frame because it's definitely in the modern era. So we had many of the tools and systems and digital, maybe not as many apps as there are today, but there was a lot of things. I was thinking like when I was a young adult, I remember when like banks came out with electronic and auto bill pay, just hearing you tell your story about forgetting payments. And for me, that was
Right.
just such a profound, it was like I can schedule my bills and I don't have to think about them and they could just go. And that eliminated that problem because I had
Right.
a tool and a system that I could rely on to do that. But
And even that, like I had forgotten to which cards I had on auto pay, which ones I didn't.
yes,
So even something as basic as you have the tool, but if it's not being implemented, it's not being utilized, then even that still needs to have a system in place to ensure, okay, once I get my first bill, I go online or I call and put on auto pay, something like that.
yeah, that's great. So, how does that apply for you in your consulting and coaching business today? So, who do you deal with? Is it primary? You've mentioned entrepreneurs, but is it primarily business owners, small, medium sized people that you work with?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because when I tell people what I do, they're like, I usually get one of two responses. Either is, oh, everyone can use that, and I definitely can use that, or people, I know someone that can use that. So as much as there's always areas of improvement for time management and for procrastination and specific, the people that I typically work with are the small business owners where, again, I'd say about 5 employees or less, where you're still in charge of doing marketing and sales and again, it very it varies different industries. Again, I've worked with accountants, I've worked with lawyers, I've worked with people in real estate, I've worked with mortgage brokers, I've worked with graphic design, web design, if different industries, because when you're in that stage of where you don't have a team built out of people that are responsible for marketing, people are responsible for sales, people are responsible for running the day-to-day operations. And when we as business owners and myself, I'm also wearing all the hats in my business, trying to juggle all that, trying to carve out time for business development, whether that's prospecting, whether that's marketing, whether that's networking. Those are really the things that I tend to see where business owners are in the day to day, they feel like they're firefighting because they're just constantly putting out fires of things happening throughout the day, but they're not carving out time to bring their business to the next level with business building activities that they need to do.
Yeah, I can sympathize. I think you just detailed a little bit out of, but I wanted to ask, what are the common problems that you do see from people? Is it as simple as that? Like time management? How do I done all the things that I need to do? Or I think from your bio and website, I see you also touch on procrastination or are those kind of the common big ones? Or are there others that you see?
Yeah. So the main two things that people come to me for are time management and for procrastination. So time management, just there was one physical therapist I was working with. He had his own physical therapy practice. And he said that he's so busy with his schedule and he's constantly seeing clients that he doesn't have time to network, to do marketing, make materials. Again, he was also solopreneur. And one thing that we worked on was carving out 3 hours a week of ensuring that he's going to take this time and he's not accepting any clients. It's non-negotiable and he's going to spend it on business development. So he was able to eventually, after the first 2, 3 months we worked together, He had hired one other physical therapist to join his practice, another OT to join, an assistant that he was having join as well. He was never able to do those tasks because he was so focused on the day-to-day operations that it was taking a back seat to helping him really with building his business. There's another entrepreneur that came to me. He does web design, and this is one big element of procrastination he was dealing with was he's used to doing, let's say, one logo design, one website, and he got a proposal. Can you create 13 websites for us? It was like a chain of nursing homes. And he told me, he said, the reason I reached out to you is because I feel like I've been pushing this off for so much time, and that's never good for business. You never want to have them wait for you to send a proposal. And we realized that he was procrastinating because there was a fear of rejection that they would say no to his proposal he worked on. There was a fear of success that if he was going to get 13 websites, how am I going to service all 13? I've never done more than one. I don't know if I have enough staff to service that. And then there's also the fear of overwhelm of, I don't know where to start. I've only done one website at a time. How do I even submit a proposal? So that really personified for me the element of procrastination where you think, okay, you're going to get a six-figure deal by making 13 websites. Why can't you get your act together, quote unquote, and do it? Because there's so much behind it that is holding them back from taking action. So those are really, whether it's procrastination or time management, those are typically the elements that people come to me to help them address.
Yes, as business owners, I think we all can use coaching in the time management and procrastination issues. Some of us are further along, but I'm curious, how does your process work? If somebody signs up for your coaching, how does that process work?
Absolutely. So the way I work is I do a very customized approach. I don't have a set format of, okay, these couple weeks we're going to work on this, these couple weeks we're going to work on that. Because first I need to get an assessment and say, okay, what are the struggles that you're dealing with? What are the challenges before even creating a system for them? And then again, sometimes I'll meet with someone weekly for an hour, sometimes twice a week, three times a week, sometimes every other week, depending on what they need
Mhm.
and how intensive they want to work on that element of their business. And then I do a lot of accountability, a lot of hand holding with them, similar to a boxing coach where I'm in your corner at all times. Not only am I working with you during the session, I would hate for one of my clients to be sitting there procrastinating for 3 hours at their desk. And then, I can't talk to Avi until till Tuesday and it's only Thursday. So what I do is I allow them to, again, any questions to reach out to me at any time. That's part of the package. In addition, I also send, if they want, daily accountability check-ins to see if they're taking action on their commitments that they wanted to take action on. And then as we progress, we work on different areas and it's really as long as they're finding that there's a new area to work on, which oftentimes there's so many different parts of our business we can develop. That's how long we coach for. And then after I find that they've made significant progress, then we can scale it back to monthly check-ins or scale it back to quarterly check-ins. And that's really the process I have.
That
That's
makes
great.
sense. Maybe just drilling in a little bit more, let's say just a theoretical fake argument that I procrastinate sometimes. But so I guess if we were in to enter into, if I like a initial consulting call or maybe the first two or three calls, it sounds like it's more of a therapy session where you're trying to get to the root of the issue, that why are you not the task that you want to accomplish? I've heard you mention a few things that resonate very strongly with me: overwhelm or fear of rejection. Or sometimes for me, I can get stuck. If I don't know exactly how to do something, then it's easy for me to pivot and say, okay, I can look at that later, or I'll focus on this. Is that what the early sessions are like? It's really more of a therapy session, just trying to dig to the root of what is causing procrastination at a systemic level or even
Right.
specifically.
So that's really where it helps to have the therapy background
Yeah.
because it's not therapy per se, but I do have that training in how to navigate a session. And it could feel very therapeutic because again, what oftentimes if what the procrastination or hypothetically your procrastination would be is there sometimes it's a fear and sometimes it's I don't even know where to start.
Mhm.
When that happens, it's what I often do for my clients that are struggling with that is I offer them the $1 million question, which is if I had to give you $1 million to figure out what the next step would be, what would that be? Who would I call? Where would I research? Who would I network with? What's one step that one task or one email I can send or one message that I can correspond with? What's the next step that I can do? And oftentimes it's that ability to, it opens our mind to be have more of awareness because like a classic example that I've seen is more a home example, but let's say you're trying to put a bookshelf in your house, right? Or in your office really. And if I tell you, okay, go buy a bookshelf, but you can't buy a bookshelf because you don't know how wide the space is. You don't even have a tape measure. How are you going to buy a bookcase if you don't even know what size to get? So if you have on your task list to get a bookshelf or something or write a proposal, but you don't have that background information, then you're doing yourself a disservice because you're giving yourself a guilt trip for, oh, I still haven't done it yet. I still haven't done it yet. When in reality, that's not really the action that needs to be done. And what's important is to delineate what is the next physical action that I could do to move that project forward. And again, sometimes it's having a conversation with someone, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a spouse, whether it's an employee, or sometimes it's we're doing 5 minutes of research and seeing what are the steps. One person was telling me he was procrastinating buying tickets. His next action was to speak to his wife and find out what dates work for her. He was scrolling through the airline sites and just looking for tickets, but he didn't even know when he was flying. He didn't know which weekend. So it was an exercise in futility because it wasn't really his next action.
Hmm.
So a lot of times we try to identify what is that next step that we can take. And oftentimes it's not what we think it is.
That's so interesting. And wow, what a relevant example. We do
Mhm.
that when we travel. For me, it can be mind numbing to if there's way too many options or we have a pretty flexible lifestyle and ability. Sometimes we look at exactly that. Like, how do we pick a date and a time and even all that? Yeah. That's great. So is your process then, I'm sure it's flexible, as you mentioned, and customizable, but are you as a client, am I walking away with a list of, hey, these are my next 5 actions, and this is the most critical one for me to go work on? And then I love the fact that you weave in accountability in terms of whatever works best in that situation, be it weekly check in or in the moment. It sounds like you have some SOS type text messages or calls, maybe. But is that kind of the takeaway from a lot of this? Is more of a plan of attack and a
So it's
prioritizing?
interesting. So actually, one of the things that I do as well is after a session. So I write notes during our session,
Mhm.
and during a session we come up with commitments that well, these are things I want to do, and I send an email to my clients after a session, and they can get a clear list of okay, here are the things that I'm committed to doing, and here is what is going to be relevant for my next week. And that practice, again, sometimes I'll leave that off because I want them to come up with it. I want them to work on their system. So I'll intentionally leave off what the actions are and I'll challenge them to figure out what the actions are. But it definitely is something where trying to identify what those actions are and then to really break it down into more of a fine tune example. What is that next action I need to do? And is it a phone call? Is it an email? Can I do it in less than 2 minutes? Let me just do it. Do I need to set aside time for that? So there's a lot of different steps that need to be addressed when looking at those action. And then it's funny you mentioned the SOS. So I once had a client who would send me voice notes on WhatsApp, and I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that. I actually enjoy voice notes. And he sent me a voice note. I told him that you can text me anytime, message me anytime, and I'll get back to you within a couple hours during business hours. And he sent me a voice note at about 1:50 in the morning. And again, I don't have my phone near me. My phone's charging in the living room.
Yeah.
I don't have it next to me. And I tell my client, don't worry about it. It's not going to wake me up because I don't have my phone next to me. And there was a series of 5 voice notes he sent that I talk about this and I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. And I remember the last voice note that he sent me is I just realized that as I'm talking this out to you, I really solved my issue. I know exactly what I need to do and I figured out what the next steps are. To me, that was the biggest element of accountability is knowing that there's someone that you can talk to
Mhm.
and knowing that if you're just spelling out what the challenge is, oftentimes that's half the solution. And again, just trying to, as we think about it, like it's a lot of my sessions, often I'm just asking questions because they come up with their own solutions because everyone knows their own business best and everyone has their own, they know their operations, they know who their clients are. And if I'm just empowering them to come up with the solutions, they're a lot more likely to be successful than if I'm just going in and telling them, do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100% resonates. That's definitely teach a man to fish rather
Yes.
than give him a fish.
And you brought up a very good point earlier about finding the tune in all these to break down the actions. Even last week, Mike and I talked about it. We have procrastinated some actions. We keep on pushing them off, and we realize they're so generic. Like, I don't even know where to start. And
Mm.
I don't know exactly how to do this on them. But you brought such a good point about really breaking down, see what's the next step? What do I
Mhm.
need to do to accomplish the bigger action that is the big picture? But I'm curious, how do you deal with people that have a lot of fear, for instance, fear of failure or fear of maybe bringing support and they're not the right people? How do you deal with that?
It's a great question. And again, a lot of times it is those next actions, and a lot of times it is, okay, I don't want to make this phone call. And there was actually one person I was working with, again, that physical therapist, and he had to collect an invoice from someone for, I think there was about 10 sessions that were not paid. It was about $200 a session. So it's $2,000. And he felt uncomfortable making this phone call. And when we talked about it, again, he talked about how money was always a taboo topic in his family. And then we also mentioned that this person wants to pay the invoice. He told him, like, anytime that there was a therapy session that's not called for, I want to pay for it. Don't hesitate to invoice me. And this person was worth probably about $100 million as well. So there was
Yeah.
no rational reason why he was avoiding
Yeah.
having this conversation. And sometimes so what we did on the session is, actually, I gave him a challenge. Is, can you make that call right now? And he's like, not really. I'm like, why not? He's like, I just don't feel comfortable. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you with that conversation. So there are a lot of times where in the session itself, I'll have clients do uncomfortable things that will demonstrate that it's within their capability, and it's not as hard as they think it is. That's one thing. There's other strategies that, again, if it's not in session, there's Mel Robbins has the 5-second rule where you count backwards and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just go. Sometimes we'll talk about, I'm not going to get the entire thing done. I'm just going to set a timer for 10 minutes and start, and I'll work through that. Sometimes we'll use Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog, where
Yeah.
if I'm giving that task to do a very uncomfortable task, I can either spend all day ruminating about it and getting all nervous about it, or I can get it done earlier in the day, and the rest of my day will be a lot calmer because I got that really important or really gross task out of the way. So a lot of these strategies that could be used for that, depending on the circumstances. And that's why it's great when I provide that toolbox of different strategies that could be used for different circumstances.
Love it. That's something that we have grown to adopt, I would say, in our own. We work together. Obviously, we have our own businesses and we're partners. And we meet Monday morning to make our plans for the week. And then each day or many days, we'll have some meetings together about different topics. And we've found that we have to do that in the morning. Like, we're fresh, we're energized, we're ready to go. We will get it done. If we schedule something for the afternoon, then life gets in the way. There's different things. It's the likelihood of us actually having that meeting and getting something done is, it just, the percentage goes further and further down.
Right, right. And that's why I encourage my clients to have that awareness of when do they operate best.
Mhm.
And for some, morning. For some, that they have the morning is more of they don't wake up even with coffee for until 11, 12 o'clock in the morning. And that's when they can start and get energized. Some work really well late at night. So again, that's part of the beauty of having a customized approach, where whatever works best for each person is what I'll suggest for them. And it doesn't have to be the same. Their highest level of productivity doesn't have to be fitting into the box of what the world views as optimal.
We could be your ideal client because we're married, and so you have this marriage, therapy background, and then
Yes.
we're entrepreneurs, but one of the things we really struggle with is accountability. Like, it's hard for us to be hard on one or the other. We're both these kind of, we'll get to Monday morning and, okay, sometimes I'm grouchy if we haven't done things and let you point that out, but a lot of times it's, "Oh, it's okay. We'll catch it this time," or whatever, and so what kind of accountability tips do you have, or how do you work with people? I'm sure you have a client where they have a task and then the next session you get together and, did you do that task? No, I had to do other things or whatever. How are you with holding people accountable or driving that, or ensuring that people do better at accountability?
100%. So what I try to really focus on is understanding what went wrong. And again, there's no shame, there's no guilt. Okay, you had a task you want to do. what was it about it that was challenging? Why didn't it work? Was it more of a fluke where there was no physically possible way to do it because it was a swamped week and my expectations of doing it were not realistic? Was it because there was a fear that came up and I need to address that fear? Is it because I forgot about it and therefore I need to create a system of remembering it in the moment and maybe setting an alarm or having it written down somewhere visible that's, again, not just a post-it note on the desk, but for some people, like having maybe on their screen even would be helpful for that, having it as their frog of the day. So it really depends on what the reason is. But the biggest thing that we can do for ourselves is to take a step back and say, what is it about this experience that didn't go right? Again, just the classic Einstein quote, if you do same action repeated again is,
Definition of insanity. Yeah.
so in a similar way, like there's no reason why we should go through the same situation and find out that didn't work well again and again. We have to understand what's going on behind it. And again, in terms of accountability, there's a lot of options for accountability. Again, I work as a coach and I help people with accountability. There's accountability people can have with a spouse or a family member or an employee or employer. There's also one company out there called Focus Mate, where you can be paired up with someone somewhere else in the world that
Hmm.
all you're doing is just holding yourself accountable that I'm going to sit in front of my desk on a Zoom or something like a Zoom, and we just do our focused work for that period of time. I know that's a very creative way people can hold themselves accountable for doing a task with someone being there looking at them being while they're doing that task. So there's charts that could be made if you want to give yourself like a checklist or a lot of different ideas for that. But the biggest thing for any accountability is when something doesn't go right, and we're not perfect. We're not going to expect perfection. If we are, that's another issue. But when things don't go right, instead of looking at it as like a condemning, oh, I did a terrible job. How could I have done that? More looking at it with a curiosity, like what happened and what can I learn from that?
Yeah, I like that concept of grace, but also that's what we try to do a lot of times. Like we'll find if there's something that's just repeatedly not getting done, it's a little bit more from that angle. And that's
Yeah.
where Lydia, I think, even brought the example up where it was like, okay, what's going on here? Why are we not doing this? And we'll find, okay, our action's not really clear. Like it's this vague, let's do this, but it doesn't really say, okay, that's what this means. Let's get this done. Let's get
Right.
that done. And that
Right. And
certainly
it
helps.
reminds me that I had one person I was working with, and on their list of projects was they wanted to redo their website. And we talked about how that's so undefined. Technically, you can be redoing your website indefinitely. There's no endpoint to redoing your website. There's always features you can add. There's always things to edit or to change, and changing logos, changing colors, changing
Mhm.
styles and layouts. And what we realized was the reason why she wasn't doing that project is because it was a never ending project and it would never be completed.
Yeah.
So rather we said, okay, what is a threshold that we can say is this is what I want to do for editing my website to at least accomplish X, Y, or Z. And once we had that, then it was more tackle. She was able to tackle it better because she had an end in mind and it wasn't just this redo website or just like having something on a project list. So just do marketing or networking. Like what does that mean?
Yeah.
So without that clarity, I know David Allen talks about this in Getting Things Done in GTD about having a list of what the vision is and then creating the steps to outline that.
Yeah, that's right where we were coming from because a lot of ours are like develop a marketing plan or whatever. And
Mhm.
yeah, you need those. I'm also a list person. Like I get so much gratification out of crossing something off a list or checking off a list. Even if I put make a list and that's one of my items that I check off, I'll go put that on there. But that allows you to have, I forget who we heard this from recently, but to have small, quick wins. And that really builds momentum towards a bigger project plan or an activity that you want to have. And yeah, that's exactly a great approach to putting that down. Okay, what's something you can tackle this week? Or and it's very concrete that you can say, okay,
And many
Right.
times, even if we have a system like a calendar, the most simple system there, we have reminders, we have meetings in the calendars, we have tasks, I need to do this and that. And even after we have all these tools in place, the system, and then we identify what's going on here. Why am I still procrastinating this action? Why am I not doing, even after we identified what's going on, we're still procrastinating. And the only thing that I could come up with is just do the freaking work, like just go out there and do it. But do you have any other tips for people that even after they identified what's going on, even if after they identified why they're still procrastinating, how do you break through?
So two things that come to mind. Again, it's very common because just because we know why we're procrastinating doesn't mean we're going to actually address it. The two tips that come to mind are, aside from breaking into the next action, where we're making it clear to what is the next step. One is finding a time for it, putting it on the calendar in a way where, okay, I know this is going to take me 30 minutes of uninterrupted work. Where am I practically going to have that on my calendar? And if I say, "Hey, I'll find the time later, I'll figure it out later," oftentimes that later never happens
Mhm.
because I've had clients I worked with who they said, "Oh, this is a 3-hour project." Who has 3 open hours in their day on a typical week? Like, it's not that if you're waiting for that to happen before you can move forward on a project, then best of luck to you, unless you're intentional about it. So that's one thing. If you can have it put on a calendar for a specific time slot or somewhere where it makes sense, depending on the circumstances. And the next tool that I would suggest is set a 10-minute timer or a 5-minute timer and just say, okay, after 5 minutes, I'll be done. Or after 10 minutes, I'll be done. If I want to continue, I'll have that ability because oftentimes it's starting the task that we push off. But once we're in momentum, then once we're in the zone, okay, we'll just keep going. It's not going to be as bad. So sometimes even just getting ourselves to start is the biggest tool that we can use. Again, I have these timers at my desk, one of my desks at home where, okay, just a 10-minute timer. I flip it. Okay, here's my 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I can decide whether I want to continue or not. And what I found is the vast majority of times we continue for longer because we know how important it is. We know that's why we have that task on our
Mhm.
list to begin with. And it's just a matter of pushing through that first initial hump of not wanting to get started.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I think many times we have a perceived overwhelming feeling that a task will be extremely hard or extremely uncomfortable, or but then once you start going and start doing it, it's not that bad. You always have that feeling that it's not that bad after I've done it. I
Right.
didn't have to dwell on the overwhelming feeling that was really perceived before I.
And that's why that phone call, the physical therapist that going, I was with him when he made that phone call and the patient responded, okay, sure, same voice and I'll pay it today. It was just as simple as that.
It's never as
It's
bad
like,
as you
Yeah.
build it up in your head.
Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna
exactly.
get mad and yell at me or say,
Yeah.
"No, I don't
Why
wanna."
didn't he tell me early? And he told me himself, this is the type of person that would tell him, like, why aren't you giving me an invoice? Like,
Yeah.
why pay it?
Yeah.
By getting over that situation where in his mind, this is very terrifying, when in reality, it wasn't as bad as he thought. It was a 2-minute phone call. It was all positive vibes. And he was able to collect $2,000 just from all the hard work that he put in for that work.
Versus how many minutes or
Yeah.
hours was spent dreading what's gonna happen or avoiding or something. That's a common
Absolutely.
concept in exercise as well, I
Yeah.
hear that if you just say, "Okay, I'm gonna go for a 5-minute walk or a 5-minute run," or whatever, that more than likely by the time you've gone through the process of putting on your gear and going and doing that stuff, you continue going, and I can see how that very easily applies in work as well if you have the time to continue going. Yeah, that'll be great.
Absolutely. Atomic Habits, and James Clear talks about. I think that the idea that he gives is just putting on your shoes, just putting on your
Mhm.
sneakers. That alone is one small habit that, again, you're building the habit that you'll tend to get over the next step or having your clothes laid out the night before right next to your bed if you want to work out. So the more that we can make that bite size element, the better it is. There's like another client I had who was dreading, I think it was just they had to input something into the database and they were dreading that it was going to take like forever. And I said, okay, can you take a minute and just open it up and see what it even is? Like you see how much work you think it's actually going to entail. And it was about half the time that she thought it was going to take because like it was just like the fear of the unknown. Like it's going to take me forever. I don't even
Mhm.
want to think about it. But when she took those 30 seconds and just opened up the file and, oh, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
That changed her ability to get it done.
Another aspect that was eye-opening for me, I used to think, "I don't have time. I don't have enough time in a day." And when I really audited the way I spend my time in one day, I realized I have so much time that I can do. It's really about sitting down and having focus blocks where I need to focus on a task and I just do it.
That's a great topic of discussion, focus. What are some of your top tips and or tools that help focus in a particular time block or activity?
Sure. So Focus Mate is one of them. Focus Mate, where that website you can be paired up with someone and that you each are focused on your own task. In terms of focus, so again, it could be a frog or eating the frog. I'm just gonna get focused on at the beginning of the day, and then the rest of the day I'll be available for other people. There are times when a change of scenery is positive for focusing. If we're in the same place that we are all day, maybe I know my best place to focus is the local library that I have. It
Mm.
actually overlooks a lake and it's just very scenic and it's a great place to work on focused work. Obviously, there's a lot of taking off notifications or closing your
Mhm.
phone, or those are the typical answers as well. And the biggest mindset that I focus on is, let's say you're struggling with putting focus and you're getting distracted by, let's say, clients or employees or assistants or et cetera. Would you interrupt a client meeting for another client? If you're meeting with one client A, you would never interrupt client A for client B because each client deserves your full attention, your full focus, and that's customer service 101. In a similar way, when we are trying to build our business and we're trying to do the focus work that's critical for moving our business forward, we shouldn't view ourselves any less than another client. If we view ourselves just as important as a client, and I'm not going to interrupt myself because there's another client or because there's another employee. If I, again, just having that mindset alone is that if I don't have focus time, then I'm not able to move the business forward. And there's no reason I should be any less important or my time to focus on these business building activities should be viewed any less critical than meeting with another client.
That's a great reframe. Never heard it say like that.
Yeah, I guess when I was asking the question, I was expecting some of the standard answers. Focus, set focus time on your computer or use this particular app. But I love all of those. Those were really refreshing takes on how.
Because
So,
everyone knows that, right? Everyone knows, okay, yeah, if you have a notification buzzing in your pocket, you're not going to focus.
Yeah.
or if
Sometimes
it's
you
even
get your
sitting there and you can look down and go, do I have any new notifications coming in? Or, yeah.
right. But within notifications, it's good to even be aware, are these notifications serving me or are they
Mhm.
doing me more harm?
Mhm.
Do I need notifications that an email came in on my desktop? Is it serving me? Like, am I not going to check my email? So oftentimes that, like, I've had clients that I sit at their computer and there's constant buzzing throughout our session. I'm like, that's really not doing you, that's not doing you anything positive. Every time it's just a glance. But I remember there's a statistic, I forgot which university, that the average time it takes from when you're interrupted to regaining that original focus is
Mm.
about 23 minutes and
Oh,
15
wow.
seconds to get back into that same level of focus.
Right.
Whether we get sidetracked or whether we lose our train of thought or whatever
Mhm.
it is, it has a very devastating effect. So even as simple as, right, a notification on our phone or a smartwatch or on our computer desktop or someone interrupting us for a question, it really has a lot more of an impact than we give it credit for.
An order of magnitude larger than I would have guessed how long it takes. But yeah, I have all of those personally. Maybe not all. My computer is in do not disturb mode, so I don't think I have any pop-ups or bells or notifications or anything. My phone, I limit pretty much just to text messages and calls. I don't even like to see the little red number on. If I want to go into an app or look at something, I'll go. Even then, it's more distracting than it should be, but just the dopamine hit that comes with checking into all those things. But yeah, those are great. I love all that. Gosh, this is power packed with all kinds of things. I'm personally going to rewatch this multiple times just to get that stuff. But let's bring this to a head. I guess for anybody that does want to hear more about productivity or get in touch with you personally or anything, what are the best ways for people to do that?
You can reach me on LinkedIn, Avi Friedman. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and that's how we connected as well.
Yep.
Or you can reach me on my phone. My phone number is 347-531-6057. To email as well, avi@mail.co. Those are all great ways to reach out.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes for anybody that wants to reach out. And I can't think of anybody that wouldn't benefit from improvements in this area. It is, to your point, Lygia, we do have so much time in a day. We talk about that, the two of us, all the time, that it's really never, time is not our limitation. We have and can find time. It's maximizing the time that we want to spend so that we can allocate time to other things that we want to be doing outside of
Absolutely.
work or whatever. So all these tips are great, but we certainly appreciate you coming on and sharing your time with us and the audience and some great value here and love what you're doing. I'm sure it's not unique, but it's certainly not as well popularized, I would say, in terms of those kind of things. But yeah, I can imagine, and I don't know if you do this in your marketing and or with your clients, but I can imagine you can very tangibly put dollar amounts on some of these activities in terms of savings and or efficiency gains and the value that just one or two or a series of sessions can have on work and revenue. Yeah, good
Yeah.
stuff.
It's very significant savings, and the amount of scalability that you're able to do once you have that time properly allocated is tremendous.
Yeah. Avi, thanks again for coming on the show. Wish all the best. And we, again, appreciate you coming and sharing your wisdom.
Yes, thank you.
My pleasure. My
All right.
pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yep. Take care.
For those of you joining us today, we hope you enjoyed this time in the Champions Corner as much as we did. Got some awesome takeaways, and most importantly, will take action to continue living your best life and maximizing your potential. Mindset is such an important aspect of life, and when coupled with action, delivers undeniably powerful results.
Please subscribe to the podcast to hear from more great guests and get the latest mindset mastery insights and cash flow matchups.
Again, thank you so much for investing your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast.